Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Case for Construction Culture podcast. I'm here with Decatur Banker, all the way from Omaha, Nebraska. Decatur is the safety manager at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I met him at the National Safety Council event last year, and I'm privileged to have you on the show, Decatur. Thanks for agreeing to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. My first
Yes,
podcast.
first podcast. It's exciting. I know I can barely contain the energy myself. Now, you are not typical for who I normally have on, which I like. I like atypical. I like people that have a different point of view or something different to say, but you're totally committed to safety, just from a different angle, because you're not a safety director at a construction company, right? You are a safety manager at a medical center. So you are, and you're well trained. You have a master's in public health, and you spend your time inspecting, right, writing policy, walking around the medical center, noticing hazards, right, spotting things, looking for
Yep,
things, correct, things like
yep.
that.
Conducting risk assessments. Yeah, yep.
Risk, you want it compliance? Do you want to add anything? Because your world's it's still a little foreign to me. What are you doing day to day there that I'm
Every day is obviously a little bit different. We have just such a broad, diverse population of employees. So, one day we might be out with our utilities and our maintenance folks doing some confined space work, doing fall protection, or we might be in a research lab, assessing chemical use or radioactive material use and, making sure our controls are appropriate, doing exposure monitoring, things like that. Or we might have to do some work in the hospital, making sure that, patient safety and things like that are being followed. So
Well,
every day is a little different, but the concepts are all the same of what we
you
do.
may have the broadest range of things to watch of anyone who's ever been on this show,
Yeah,
Decatur. I think
yeah,
you do because
yeah,
I mean, safety is challenging anywhere, but when you're dealing with everything from confined space to chemicals, that requires a lot of education and
yeah.
awareness. So what are you excited about, Decatur? Here, it's starting to become fall here in the Midwest. What are you excited about? And I don't know if the weather impacts your job, but what are you excited? I'm thinking about college football, but what are you excited about in your job, Decatur, and in your work at this time of year?
Yeah.
Anything to do with um, the case for culture that, we're talking about balancing profitability, accountability, quality, all the things that you have to balance and think about. But what are you excited about in your world?
Yeah. Well, definitely excited for college football. That's for sure. Hoping,
Okay,
hoping my Huskers can have a good year, get that on
go
the right
high.
track. But
Uh-huh.
yep,
Big deal.
work-wise, I'd say the biggest thing. So back in November of 2024, I was promoted to safety manager, and we didn't hire my replacement, a safety specialist, until May, so a few months ago. So
Hmm.
so now that we are fully staffed, I'm able to kind of really put my priorities towards managing. And in my previous roles, I'd kind of helped manage a lot of our compliance programs, but
Hmm.
it was geared more towards maintaining those programs the way they were built. So now I kind
Hmm.
of have more leadership opportunity, more of a voice in the way things run and how I believe our program should function.
Hmm.
That's very exciting to me because kind of able to put my stamp and my footprint on things now. And internally, I now have a direct report. First time I've ever had that, and it's been really exciting for me to kind of guide them based on my personal experience. Sharing my failures, sharing what my successes have been, and just trying to help them, be the best safety professional and learn as much as they can about our diverse field of safety, and throwing all those different unique challenges our way, and just kind of hoping to have them grow. Seeing how management styles that from my direct supervisors in the past, trying to take that good and also trying to learn from the things that maybe didn't help me grow, and didn't help me be successful in certain things, and trying to spin those into positives, so that I can be the best manager that I can. And then also kind of externally, I'm now being asked to be the chair of our employee safety committee. So I'm working a lot with different department heads and different leadership, just trying to advocate for our department and our safety needs around the campus. And that's been really exciting too, just trying to help promote that culture of safety for all our students and employees. So it's been really good.
Why you're really being recognized there, Decatur. You're a higher level leader, chair of the safety committee. You have a direct report. I know you've been there a while. What, 8, 9 years?
Yep, February will be 10 years for me.
10 years, 10
Yeah,
years. So you've put your time in. It's nice to see you maturing as a leader. That's exciting.
yeah,
Absolutely. And I can tell you're doing it with a lot of integrity.
yeah,
And I know as a leader, we have to think about culture and how we shape culture and what culture is. And that's one of these big, huge 60,000 foot words that gets thrown around a lot today in the safety discussions and conferences and in the hospital world, in the business world, in the construction world. When you think about safety at a medical center, what do you, how do you define, first, how do you define culture? And what are some things you're paying attention to as a leader, as an emerging leader there, in terms of what culture actually is?
yeah, yeah. It's a great question. And, culture has several definitions, several different ones. And if you
Yeah,
ask anyone, everyone's going to have a different response to
true,
it. None of them
true.
are a catch-all, but my opinion is the way I would define culture would be perception, attitude, and then action, which kind of all go hand in hand in determining an organization's culture. So for perception, how do employees view their work? Are they there to collect a paycheck? Are they just maybe riding it out until retirement? Is it something they're truly passionate about? I don't think one is necessarily right or wrong, but I
Hmm.
think it impacts the way that their attitude is and their actions. Maybe if they're
Hmm.
just there collecting paychecks, they might have more of a neutral or possibly a negative attitude, which could lead to poor action, poor decision making, and that can ultimately have a negative impact on the culture.
Hmm.
Also, how do employees perceive their colleagues, their supervisors, leadership, the organization? Do they feel that they're cared for individually? Do they feel that they're wanted? Do they feel that their work is needed and important? Or do they feel like they're just a pawn on the chessboard? Do they feel like their colleagues try to lift them up, or do they feel like their colleagues try to bring them down? Because, I've seen both sides of that being at UNMC 10 years, I've experienced both ends of that spectrum. And do employees do they feel powered to speak up and have a voice and advocate for change, or is that something that they might be shunned for? You're trying to break the wheel and go out of the ordinary. Don't do that. Just do things the way we were always doing it. And I think if employees have that positive perception and feel like they're cared about and appreciated and have a voice, they're going to take those proactive, positive approaches to not only maintain the culture but try to make it better and do things like, reporting a near miss or reporting a potential hazard before it becomes a true negative hazard, or maybe they're trying to come up with an innovative solution to make a process safer or more efficient, or holding colleagues accountable for taking shortcuts, which might put the colleague at risk or the people around them. And those type of actions can really drive a company's culture and have a lasting impact.
I love it. Those are really good answers. I think you used the word cared about or appreciated at least 4 times.
Yeah.
And I didn't miss that because that is so key. And I don't always hear the construction guys using those words that many times. I wonder if your culture isn't different enough where a guy like you can talk about how important it is to demonstrate care. And when I hear those words, I think what you're trying to build in the what you talk about as culture is trust. trying to establish trust, connections among people, care among people, that the perceptions, the attitudes, the actions are shaped by the quality of the trust. That's what I'm hearing, among other
Hmm.
things here,
Yeah.
Decatur. And did you say be shunned? Did you use the word shunned?
Yeah.
That's a strong word. I've lived in Africa and I was once shunned myself. One of the most painful things I've ever had happen. It was very skillfully done by people who really knew how to shun somebody. But that can happen, can't it? As much as
Yes.
we work to build great culture and build inclusion and all the stuff we dream about, we're people and people have reactions and people get competitive, people get petty, and people step on each other's toes,
Hmm.
piss each other off, right? It,
Yeah.
it happens, right? So,
Yeah, definitely.
um, what are some of the challenges that you see now as you're shaping this culture, as you're working to create this positive, super healthy culture? What are one or two challenges that you see in the role that you're in now?
Yeah. So a lot of the things that I mentioned that kind of excite me about my work in safety and taking on a lot of our workplace safety programs and OSHA
Hmm.
programs and things like that also are, introducing a lot of challenges, things were always done this way. We always did it this way. I hear that a lot, but
Hmm.
it's a barrier that's always going to be there, that I'm, always going to have to overcome. But one of the big things, I think we have a lot of great policies in place, that outline all the requirements to remain compliant with OSHA, all our expectations and things like that. But what I kind of have felt has been lacking are the resources to help the organization, to help the employees truly comply with these policies. The stance I've really been trying to have is I'm not here to police you. I'm here as a resource. This is a collaboration. This is teamwork. If you don't understand this policy, or if you don't know what you're supposed to use to achieve, the requirements in this policy, work with me, just reach out. I'm here to help. I'm not here to
Hmm.
slap you on the wrist or anything. At the end of the day,
Hmm.
we all have the same goal. So just trying to put a lot of, different fact sheets, safety guidelines, things like that in place. And
Hmm.
one specific example that comes to mind is our PPE program, personal protective equipment.
Hmm.
It's one thing to tell these employees, oh yeah, you need proper head protection, you need proper eye and face protection, hand protection, foot protection, et cetera, et cetera. But
Hmm.
we talked a little bit earlier about how diverse our population is at an academic medical center. The PPE for a researcher working in a chemistry lab with poison inhalation hazards is not going to be the same PPE that we're going to have our maintenance and utilities folks wearing. We're gonna need our researcher probably in a full face respirator with organic vapor cartridges, chemical resistant gloves, and our guys working out in the confined spaces. Maybe they need a dusk mask, or maybe they don't need the full face respirator. And then our healthcare clinical providers are going to need N95 for particulate protection. They don't have that chemical exposure and things like that. And then
Hmm.
our grounds workers, they might need ear protection because they're working with, or hearing protection devices, because they're working with high noise equipment and things like that. And warehouse workers. It's all very different. So I'm just trying to bridge all those gaps, and make all these different groups feel included, and feel like they have the resources that they need to make the right choices, make the right decisions to achieve compliance. And then so another big challenge we're having is expansion, and that's something that's very exciting, but it comes with its own unique set of challenges. So the university, they've been pushing for a rural health initiative for a while now, and a lot of that stuff is starting to come into fruition, which is great. But in Nebraska, the main hub for UNMC is in Omaha, which is about as far east as you can get in the state.
Yes,
So,
it is.
we've got, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of miles of areas that don't have the resources that we have. And we take those things for granted for sure. But with this rural health initiative, we are getting healthcare facilities, trying to have a statewide footprint of healthcare
Hmm.
opportunities, healthcare access for all our residents here in Nebraska. So last year, our clinical partner, Nebraska Medicine, which is the hospital side of things, they just built a brand new healthcare facility, and this facility has infusion. It's got lab to do diagnostic testing, radiation oncology, standard oncology, state-of-the-art facility, and it's great for our residents out in central Nebraska. And with that, the university is in the process of building a brand new three-story, 110,000 square foot facility. It's going to have state-of-the-art classrooms, clinical labs, simulation labs, and we're going to be able to expand. So currently we have College of Allied Health, which is physical therapy, occupational therapy, medical lab scientists, things like that. We have College of Nursing out there, but as this new building gets built, we're going to add College of Medicine, College of Pharmacy, and College of Public Health. So that's going to allow
Wow.
students and residents in that area, to pursue their academic goals, and not have to come all the way to Omaha. They can choose to stay in rural Nebraska, get their education out there, do their clinical rotations in the communities that they grew up in and want to serve in. So it's very exciting, definitely very exciting. But anytime construction is happening, that poses its own unique set of challenges. And one of the things specifically that I've been dealing with lately is anatomy labs working with cadavers, human cadavers that are embalmed with highly volatile chemicals, they phenol solutions, formaldehyde solutions, things like that. Making sure all the engineering controls are in place. Do we need downdraft tables? How many do we need? Are we gonna get all those tested and certified? And if we don't go with downdraft tables, what do we need for our ventilation? What's our air exchange per hour rates have to be and things like that. So
My
there's been
goodness.
a
What?
lot going
I
into it.
have to interrupt. What is a
Yeah.
downdraft table?
So essentially the downdraft table is kind of like a hospital table where they work on a patient, but it's got built-in ventilation to suck all those vapors, run it
Oh, yeah.
through into the ducts and filter it out. So yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
Oh my
It's
goodness. That's a whole nother world, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I would compare it to like an air scrubber when you're working construction, right? You're
yeah,
sanding and you have your local
yeah,
system right there to just suck it before it
yeah,
causes an exposure.
yeah,
So very
yeah.
similar.
No,
Yeah,
you're right. It's probably the same as a vacuum system on an angle grinder or a demo
yeah,
saw.
yeah,
Um, so wow, those are real challenges. And you kept talking about resources to truly comply.
yeah.
Do you, do you mean the right tools, the books? What do you really mean by resources?
Kind of the books, just more so safety guidelines. So for further eye protection, for all the different groups we mentioned, what does your eye like? What ANSI ratings does this have to meet in order to comply? What type do you need? So if you're working with these chemicals, you need this specific eye
Hmm.
protection.
Hmm.
Kind of
So
the brochure to
the
help them
brochure,
know
the
what
pol
tools they need. Yeah.
and this is one of your skills, isn't it? Writing policy,
Yep.
writing the brochures.
Definitely.
And you actually like that. You enjoy that.
I've learned to enjoy it, yes. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it at
Okay.
first, but the more I do
Okay.
it, the better I get, the
Okay.
more comfortable and the more I enjoy it for sure.
I couldn't do it, Decatur. Good for you. Wow.
Thanks.
And then expansion sounds like the rural health initiative is huge. Wow. Sounds like you and your direct report have plenty to do.
Oh yeah. Very
Plenty,
busy every day,
plenty.
and it's different, which keeps it exciting because I don't know that I
Yes.
could do something where you're doing the same thing every single day. It's nice having different
Yes.
challenges being brought up. It keeps every day.
Yes. And you've we're really talking about safety culture, and culture is formed by the decisions, the behaviors, and the values of the leaders. In what way can leaders like you, Decatur, influence outcomes? Because ultimately that's what you're trying to do, whether you do it through writing or field visits or being the chair of the safety committee. How in what ways can you influence those outcomes and improve your safety outcomes?
Yeah. So one of our goals, kind of within the past year, and something we've kind of started on, is just getting a lot of personality type assessment training, going through the assessments for ourselves to kind of learn about our different personality types. And we kind of the goal first off was internally within the department. So our
Uh-huh.
department's about we're 20 deep. We have a lot of different specialties with general safety, radiation safety, chemical safety, biological safety. We're very diverse, but a lot of our programs overlap. We might have a research lab that works with chemical, radioactive, biological safety level 3 specimens and things like that. So
Hmm.
instead of, being redundant and visiting them multiple times a year and having all these different policies, if we can collaborate and have one document that achieves all of our goals for the different specialties, that's we certainly try to strive for that and being efficient, but we wanted this to kind of be able to collaborate better internally, know how each different person might perceive things and how their different work styles and things like that so that we could collaborate better on these projects. But it's kind of turned in also to, okay, well, we're developing all these different trainings and we're doing all this different outreach for our workers and our students, how can we be more inclusive and appeal to them and, understand that not everyone learns the way we do. We got to look at things through several different lenses and we got to appeal to all ends of the spectrum as we're designing our training courses, and providing education. So that's kind of one of the big things that we've been doing.
Hmm.
And I think it's been certainly very helpful. And I think when we talked earlier, you mentioned the 360 training, and
Hmm.
I think that's something too that I'd like to look into that would be very
Sure,
beneficial.
sure. Yeah, 360 assessments where you
Yeah.
get people from every direction above you at your level and reports, people reporting to you to give feedback that you then compare to your own assessment. And there's always some blind spots and
Hmm.
it's challenging. We certainly can talk about that. That would be
Definitely.
fun to consider something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, we're just a couple more questions, or maybe just one, unless you want to add something or ask me something. Uh, and that would be uh, if you have a story, Decatur, of a successful change effort, or maybe a failed change effort. I find I almost learn more from the failures and the flops, even though I don't like talking about them. But if you could talk about either a success or a failure without getting anyone in trouble, uh, I would love to hear that story.
Definitely. Definitely. So I'm gonna kill two birds with one stone here. I have a
Okay.
story that was a failure that I think ultimately turned into a success. And
Oh,
that's kind of one
perfect.
of the
My
things,
favorite kind.
Yeah, yeah. And it's one of those things that I've learned, early on, I maybe took the failures too personal, but I think
Uh-huh.
one of the big things is you learn from those failures and you figure out how do you flip it? How do you do that 180 to turn it into a success? Because not everything
Yeah.
has to stay a failure. So that's
Yes.
definitely something as I've grown, I've tried to really hammer down on. But
Yes.
yeah, so when I was pre in my previous role as a senior specialist, like I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of program maintenance, not so much program development. I was asked to develop a laser safety program for our clinical partner, the Nebraska Medicine, the hospital.
Hmm.
They do a lot of lasers for refractive eye surgery, blasting kidney stones, a lot of different dermatology procedures where you're lasering off warts, tattoo removal, aesthetics. Certainly, there's a lot of different things. So it's very broad. And these are high-powered lasers, that can cut tissue, cut skin, things like that. They can cause eye damage if you have eye exposure to it. So it was something that I took very seriously and thought was very important. And it was exciting because it was the first time I've really had to build a foundation for a program versus kind of taking over something that already had a foundation and was already established. So
Hmm.
because of my excitement, I think I was I came in guns a-blazing, right off the bat. I purchased the ANSI Z136.3 standard, which is laser safety and healthcare standard.
Hmm.
I went to the Laser Institute of America. I got the gold standard training, and I thought I had all the tools and the technical knowledge I needed to build this program. So,
Hmm.
I first we developed a very robust policy and a very robust training curriculum based on the knowledge I learned. And then with that, I worked with the clinical partners biomedical department that kind of handles servicing all the instrumentation and medical equipment. I got a list of all the departments and spaces using the lasers and the laser
Hmm.
generating equipment. And I sent out the policy, I sent out the training curriculum, and I said,
Hmm.
"Here's my expectations. Let's accomplish this."
Hmm.
And needless to say, I quickly learned that was not necessarily, it was not the right approach. And I was met with quite a bit of pushback and concerns, and ultimately a lot of non-compliance because of that. And
Hmm.
there's definitely some barriers that were new to me since this was a project for our clinical partner. And we're different institutions. We have different resources. We have different leadership. We have different, IT systems, things like that. So where I went wrong ultimately was not including all the different stakeholders and all the personnel who are going to be affected by the changes in this decision making. I definitely should have included them up front because they knew the landscape of not only their organization but the laser use much better than I did. I had great knowledge of the regulations and the standard, but I didn't know what part of those regulations were necessarily going to apply to the organization. So
Hmm.
including them up front would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of headache. And if I could do it all over again, the first action I would have taken would be I would have established a laser safety committee. Obviously I would have read through the standard, I would have gotten the training just to get that foundation of knowledge. But then I would have established the committee, which would have allowed for a lot of input, a lot of feedback loops, and it would have given our personnel the opportunity to feel like they have a sense of ownership versus they're being
Hmm.
policed and told what to do
Hmm.
and you got to do X, Y, and Z. So
Hmm.
eventually, those were the steps I took after my realizations, and luckily, the hurdles weren't too great since a lot of the legwork was already done. It was just some pivoting and tweaking of processes and expectations just to make them more applicable with the organization to align better with their goals and needs. And ultimately, I would say, yeah, it ultimately turned into a success, but there were some failures along the way that I learned from, but it's a program I'm proud of and a project that I am proud of. So,
Nice. Nice. How do you know it's a success, Decatur?
um, I think that the we have areas that reach out, with questions. Am I doing this right? Is this signage appropriate? Is this eyewear appropriate? Do we have all the appropriate training? I think that them being proactive to do the right thing to ensure compliance and promote compliance within their groups is one way that I measure it. We go around, we do inspections, and from where we started, which was obviously ground zero to where we are, is night and day. And I think, it's certainly not a finished project. We can certainly always improve, and standards are constantly changing, and medical procedures. There's always new procedures on the horizon that are going to involve different lasers and things like that. So we always have to be on our toes and ready to pivot and ready to learn new things. But yeah, I would say that just the buy-in and yeah, the
Yeah.
willingness is
Do you
really
measure incidents? Do you say, yeah, we had three incidents last year, one this year? Is that part of your success definition?
it is, yeah. And I'd say that we have gone a year and a half without one. And
Mm.
one of the reasons that we were asked to take on this program is there were some incidents, fire-related incidents with these. So yeah, we haven't had one in a year and a half, knock on wood. But that's not, since it's a fairly new program, so I don't have all the historical incidence rates and things like that. So that's obviously one way of measuring it, but yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Wow. Well, congratulations. That's a great story. I love that it has both the failure and the success. I
Yeah.
think that's great. And boy, like I can imagine you had the kind of confidence going in where you didn't think you maybe needed a committee, right? You got the training. You had some. This is one of my passions is talking about when we feel confident and educated and well prepared, we don't always think of including other people. If you were less prepared, if you were less educated or less intelligent, I don't know, you may have reached out more and may have, said, I need help. But when we're really well trained, we're really at a high level of leadership, we can forget those steps, right? And we can either move too quickly or make some
Yeah.
missteps. And it sounds like you did that and you
Completely.
corrected and
Yep.
it worked out. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank
Two
you.
thumbs up from me, Decatur.
Thank
Any
you.
final comment you want to make about culture or balancing all the different, I mean, you guys have to be profitable, right? You guys have got to make money. You can't only do safety and compliance. I mean, you have to be compliant. You got to do everything to avoid the incidents and the injuries and the lawsuits that will follow trouble in your world, especially, right?
Yeah.
Where you
Yeah.
get some medical accidents happening or incidents, and the lawyers just swarm like sharks, don't they, in your
Hmm.
world?
They sure do. Yeah, I think that, the big thing for me is just not everything needs to be set in stone. I don't know how all these different groups, I don't know their specialties. They are, for our facilities workers, I don't know their work as good as they do, and I trust them. So when they, make recommendations, oh, I think we should do it this way, or I don't think this is feasible, I certainly always try to make sure that we're partnering and doing these things together versus a do as I say type of thing. It has to be done this way, or. And I know a lot of these things get expensive, implementing all these different, equipment for controlling hazards and things like that. It can get pricey. So when
Yes.
they come to me with concerns, I always try to help them find a solution, something that might be more feasible for them. And
Yes.
that's probably one of the biggest things I would say, and just trying to make sure we're keeping that partnership, those open feedback loops, versus having that policing mentality where it's just I expect you to do it exactly how I told you to do it.
Yes, yes, those days are gone,
Yeah,
Decatur. I think
yeah.
that's not effective safety anymore. We all know that, I think. So excellent work. Thanks for being on the podcast. How can people find you, Decatur, if they want to reach out to you? What's the best way to connect to you?
Yeah, I'd say best way would be LinkedIn. Decatur Banker is my name on there. Yeah,
Yeah,
that best way. And yeah, thank you for having me on it. Like I said earlier, it's my first podcast. I've listened to a few of your episodes. I've listened to
good.
a few other safety podcasts, and it's great. I think a lot of the safety concepts are very similar, but it's nice, hearing stories and insight from different industries, and
Yes,
can I use some of that stuff in my industry? And,
yes.
yeah, a lot of similarities, but certainly a lot of big differences as
Well, we
well. So,
enrich each other, I think, when there's cross fertilization and we sort of expand occasionally. Who's on the show here is really helpful. So thanks again, Decatur
yeah.
Banker. Have yourself a great day. I do wish the Cornhuskers the best, except for when they play the Gophers.
All right. Good luck to those Gophers as well.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time, maybe at the NSC conference next
Sounds
time.
good. I plan
All
to
right,
be there.
take care.